Welcome back, everyone. And boy, do we have a loaded, locked on Grizzlies for you today. Starting with the big news, Morant being named second team All NBA. We're going to talk about that, the financial impact, because now next season, he'll be playing for a little bit of cheese. And plus, I'm going to hit you with a scenario that you may not have heard yet about the Grizzlies in the future at the backup point guard position. Let's go. Coming up on Locked On Grizzlies.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am your host today, DeMichael Cole, co-host of Locked On Grizzlies podcast. First and foremost, we thank you for being a listener of Locked On Grizzlies. So make sure you're staying tuned to everything going on. You can follow me at DeMichael C on Twitter. Stay tuned with everything going on through our YouTube, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasting apps. Locked On Grizzlies is there, and we're there every single day. So we appreciate you for tuning in. A lot of good things going on, right now. All the postseason accolades are starting to come in for the Grizzlies, and the most recent one, Morant, All NBA. That's a big deal in Memphis. He is the first player since Marc Gasol in 2014-2015 to make an All NBA team. Only the third player in Grizzlies franchise history. Zach Randolph did it in 2010, 2011. Marc Gasol did it twice. And recently, 2014, 2015, Marc Gasol, that was the only season that a Grizzlies player has ever made first team All NBA. So Morant, and actually, I wrote this in my story on the commercial appeal on yesterday. Morant was on pace to be named first team NBA as well, barring the injuries. We all know he missed 25 games. That kind of held him back in that regard. If you look at the first team guards, Devin Booker, Luka Doncic, those two guys finished the season really strong. Devin Booker, he finished the season strong because Chris Paul went down, and the Suns kind of had that stretch where they stayed consistent, and he was averaging over 30 points a game. Luka Doncic, same thing. The Mavs were in that 6, 7, 8 spot for a while, and Luka, he turned it on another notch. So did the Mavs, and they ended up getting up to the 4th seed. Now we see, they're in the Western Conference Finals. So both of those players, well deserving. But Morant, he was an all-star starter. He was an all-star starter from the Western Conference. That was showcased, him being on pace to finish as a first-team All-NBA guy. But you take what you get. Second team All NBA. Not only was he second team All NBA, he was pretty high up on the voting. He was the second player on second team All NBA, seventh player overall in voting. The only player who was higher than him, Joel Embiid. Joel Embiid is, as we know, the guy who finished second in the MVP voting. This voting thing is a little, I have my things to say about it because Joel Embiid, second year in a row where he's had this incredible season and he's finished second in the MVP voting, only to be second team All NBA. So again, credit to Morant, the great season he had, winning the Most Improved Player award as well. But once again, we saw Morant kind of campaigning for Desmond Bane to win that Most Improved Player award yesterday on Twitter. But again, this just a big list of achievements for this Grizzlies. Even the awards they didn't win. I mean, we can start with what they won. Zach Kleiman, Executive of the Year. Morant, Most Improved. Morant, second team All NBA. Jaren Jackson Jr., first team All Defense. What about what they didn't win? Jaren Jackson finishes top 5 in Defensive Player of the Year voting. Desmond Bane finishes top 5 in Most Improved Player voting. Jaren Jackson Jr. also gets a vote for Most Improved Player. I believe he got a second team vote, but he was one of the top 10 players in the Most Improved Player voting as well. Taylor Jenkins, second in the Coach of the Year running. So a lot of things to be proud of, a lot of things to look forward to. We mentioned John Morant, All Star game starter, Desmond Bain, Rising Stars game, played really well in that game, really represented the Grizzlies over All Star break really well. So, a lot of things I feel like that you can look forward to going forward based off of this season, based off of the achievements, and even, Jaren Jackson Jr. nominated for the Community Service Award. I think that was a big deal. I wrote a story during the playoffs, actually, the commercial appeal about Jaren Jackson and Jordan Poole. And I talked to a lot of people who were at La Lemire, the prep school that those two played at together, where they were roommates, and just getting an idea for their personalities. And what I got from it was Jordan Poole, as I kind of wrote in the story, he was more of the goofball, the class clown, the clumsy guy, the makes everyone laugh. Or Jaren Jackson Jr., really nice guy. Pick up your trash behind you. They talked to me about how a lot of the people there didn't even, outside of his, being 6'10", 6'11" at that time, they had no clue that he was, a five-star NBA player just because of the way he carried himself. And to see that said about him in high school, it carried over to the NBA where he's been nominated for all these, great off the court awards as well. So that's a big, shout out to him because that's just as important as being named first team all defense and all of these things as well. So a lot of good news, with the Grizzlies on that end. But Ja Morant, first and foremost, second team all NBA. Of course, we know what's next goal is. He basically, hinted at it in his exit interview. First team all NBA, MVP. Those are next up on his list. Are those goals in reach? I think so. Because there's an argument that can be made. Ja Morant, if he plays out this season without the injuries and things like that, with the way that he was playing, over 27 points per game, leading that Grizzlies team to the second best record in the NBA. And not only that, but the attention that he brought to Memphis, there was so much value in that. Him being the most watched player in the playoffs, him being up there with Stephen Curry and LeBron James in terms of Instagram video views throughout the course of the NBA season. All of that highlights the the fact that Ja Morant has become must-watch TV. The Grizzlies are going to be must-watch TV next season. The biggest beneficiary, when you talk about that MVP voting, being a guy who I didn't have an NBA vote this season, but covering colleges in Philadelphia, I had votes there with the Atlantic 10, with, the CAA conference. And the thing about the voting process is a lot of those people don't get to see Ja Morant like you Locked On Grizzlies viewers do. They don't get to see Ja Morant each and every game. When they see Ja Morant make those spectacular plays, it's out of their minds to them. A lot of the Grizzlies people are like, "Oh, we saw a dunk better than that last week, but it was amazing. But we saw something better than that last week." But you get to the understanding that next season, the difference will be the Grizzlies will be on TV more. There's a chance that the Grizzlies could be playing on Christmas and other holidays as well. But there's a good chance the Grizzlies could get a Christmas game with, the way that Ja Morant has really turned into this phenomenon. If the Grizzlies get as many TV games as we expect, that's going to help his MVP candidacy because more of those national eyes that I just mentioned don't get to see him a lot. They're going to see him more. That's going to give them the chance to say, hey, I saw a lot of Morant this season. I'm voting him first team. And it's also going to help his MVP candidacy if the Grizzlies have a season similar to the season they had this year. And I see no reason why they shouldn't. Overall, the West will be better. We'll talk more about that, as the time gets closer. But there's a good case to be made for Ja Morant as first team All NBA and even to that next level of being an MVP potentially or top 3 MVP candidate next season. So I want to talk to you about the financial part of this as well, because Ja Morant making All NBA. It's a big deal for the Grizzlies franchise and history, but there's a lot of money riding on this. So we're gonna talk about that. But before we get to that, I gotta talk to you about Built Bar because Built Bar, as we know, is some of the best chocolate out there. It's really good chocolate. And the thing about Built Bar is you got so many great options. You got mint brownie, you got the coconut almond, and you got the white chocolates, cookies, and cream. You got the Built Bar puffs. All of these great options, but Built Bar, the thing about it is Built Bar prioritizes good taste while also making sure that these bars are as healthy as they can be. So if you're one of those people, you want something that tastes really good, but you want it to be healthy too, Built Bar prioritizes that. That is what they want for you as well. Half as many calories as a lot of these bars out there, and just as much chocolate. Built Bar is covered in 100% real chocolate. So go get your Built Bar right now. Go to built.com, use the promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off your order. So again, that's built.com, use the promo code LOCKED15, get 15% off your order and go get you that Built Bar. So the thing about Ja Morant and this contract extension is there's a lot of money riding into this decision. And this is where, I think players and you talk about how players really care about who's making the decision in this voting, because at the end of the day, a lot of money rides on what media members say in terms of voting. But here's the case with Ja Morant. Right now, even though he's made All NBA, me and Sean talked about it on a previous episode with the 30% kicker. That's a big deal in NBA certain contracts. So basically, you have a 25% kicker, which is where Ja Morant is right now, which would have him paid 5 years, $186 million on his contract extension. If Ja Morant makes All NBA next season, doesn't have to be first team, doesn't have to be second team. It can even be third team. If he makes All NBA next season, you're talking about almost a $40 million difference in total money for his contract. That's what he'll need to be at 30%. So we're talking 5 years, 186 rookie extension with just the All NBA season this year. If he doesn't make All NBA next year, 5 years, $223 million if Ja Morant makes All NBA next season. That's a big difference. That's a huge difference. But here's how it works. Because when you see Ja Morant sign on the dotted line this year, the contract, it's going to be very loose. It's going to say 5 years, roughly $186 million with the potential. A potential kicker will be placed in the contract. Whereas if Ja Morant makes All NBA next season, he will get $223 million. So it's more of how this works. It's an extension that won't kick in until after next season. Take Jaren Jackson, for example. We saw Jaren Jackson signing an extension before the start of this season. Jaren Jackson extension will kick in when next season starts up. So Ja Morant, once he signs this extension, potentially, I'm almost acting as if it's a foregone conclusion, because if you saw, we talked about the exit interviews, me and Sean, Ja Morant said that it is his plan to be in Memphis long term. And Zach Kleiman, basically without saying it, GMs and executives have to be very careful with their words, but he all but said the Grizzlies plan on offering Ja Morant whatever they have to. So with that being said, I'm almost assuming it's a done deal at this point. So right now that max contract looks like 5 years, 186. It doesn't kick in this upcoming season. It won't kick in until, what will that be, 2023, 24? That's when Ja Morant's extension will kick in. That's why next season matters in terms of the language, in terms of the money. If once he signs it this offseason, it'll say 5 years, 186, with the potential of being 5 years, $223 million if he makes All NBA next season. So John Morant, just in case some people are gonna say, oh, he got his extension. Is the hunger gonna be the same? Well, yeah, because he's gonna be playing for 40 million more, basically next season. So again, John Morant is playing for really really big dollars this upcoming season. I think it's a huge incentive. I'm sure the Grizzlies will have no problem offering that. We saw similar situations with other players. Michael Porter Jr. coming into this season when he signed his extension, there was a kicker placed in that as well. If he made All NBA, he could have boosted that up to even more money. But as we know, Michael Porter did not play much this past season. So John Morant is in a very good situation here. If he comes back next season, plays like he did this season, and makes, it doesn't have to be first team, doesn't have to be second team, makes third team All NBA. The money is laid out perfectly for him. So it's a great situation for him, but it's also a great situation for the Grizzlies. It's financial security, securing their players. A lot of people, are saying, how much will that's $40 million, how much will that matter in terms of the Grizzlies' plans? Well, here's what Zach Kleiman said. These aren't my words. Zach Kleiman basically said they want to retain someone because you have salary cap restrictions when it comes to going out and signing all these other guys. But if they want to retain someone who they have bird rights to, they're going to do it. Paying is not going to be a problem. The whole small market thing, as long as Robert Pera is the owner in Memphis and he's supporting the front office the way he is right now, as Zach Kleiman has pretty much put it, that he has full support, from Robert Pera. As long as that's the case, you can throw all the small market stuff out the window because it doesn't matter when you have a top 5 richest owner in the NBA. Robert Pera is one of the richest owners in the NBA. He's willing to pay into the luxury tax. That is a huge deal. So that $40 million, that potential, extra money that John Morant gets, it won't matter when you factor in what a Desmond Bane extension that next off season could potentially cost, or paying Brandon Clark, because you could play Brandon Clark this season, or you could pay him next season when he's a restricted free agent. So all of those things, retaining players is going to be tough. We always talk about, oh, the future is bright for this team. The future is bright for that team. Everyone, it's so easy to say that. But you have to be realistic, because here's the thing. When you talk about the future being bright for these teams, a lot of people don't mention the cost of keeping these groups together. Everyone thought Oklahoma City Thunder, their future was so bright, right? They couldn't keep Russell Westbrook, Kevin Durant, and James Harden. It cost too much. It was out of their price range. The Hawks right now, last season, everyone said, oh, the future is so bright. Now we're seeing certain players on the Hawks come up in trade talks because you're going to have to pay all these guys. You can't, it's just unrealistic to pay all of these young players, when you have such an accumulation of talent. But the Grizzlies have put themselves in position to say, look, if we want to keep a guy, we're going to pay him. Robert Pera, they have the financial support from him. Zach Kleiman is making great decisions. I mean, getting Desmond Bane and Brandon Clark on the back end of the first round, and now we're talking about those guys being extension candidates, says enough about that. But at the end of the day, John Morant's contract extension has little incentive here on what the Grizzlies will do in terms of their financial future. So that's a big deal. That's a big deal because they want to keep these guys. They're going to retain them. Now it's going to affect, what they can do in free agency, and the Grizzlies are going to have to become one of those teams who win on the margins. I think Golden State over the past couple of years, or LeBron James led teams who go out and sign guys with the mid-level exception and veteran minimum and kind of fill the roster up that way. The Grizzlies are going to be doing that around their core players. But at the end of the day, Zach Kleiman is willing to pay those guys, and John Morant's extension won't have much to do with that. Tyus Jones is another guy who we talk about who they're willing to pay. Will they be willing to pay him? We'll find out, in short order. But I'm going to tell you another name who's currently on this roster right now who could be Tyus Jones's potential replacement. If Tyus Jones doesn't return, there may be a guy on the roster right now who can be the Grizzlies' backup point guard next season. So I want to talk to you about that. But before we talk about that, we got to talk about some other risks that you may be willing to take, and that's Bet Online. Bet Online is the number one source for all of your betting needs and sports info out there. So you can find all of the latest odds with the NBA playoffs, but also MLB, MMA, and more. Thing with Bet Online is you go look at the odds right now for the Celtics and the Heat game. The Celtics are actually favorites on the road to beat the Miami Heat. Go look at the odds for the Warriors in the Mavs game. The Warriors haven't lost at home, heavy favorites, 7-point favorites, negative 300 on the money line. A lot of money to be made out there, but head over to the website or you can use your mobile device. Use your mobile device to get in on the action. BetOnline.net. The Locked On NBA Big Board is also where you can get a lot of your draft information as well. The Grizzlies have two. The Grizzlies have 2 first-round picks, and they have a high 47th overall second-round pick. There's a lot out there that's going to be talked about. So Locked On NBA Big Board. That's where the experts come together, and they'll be talking about, big board rankings. They'll be talking about draft prospect rankings. They'll be talking about potential fits with potential teams, mock drafts, and more. Locked On NBA Big Board is where you go for that info. Wherever you like to get your podcast, just like where you get your Locked On Grizzlies podcast, you can go listen to Locked On Big Board as well. So you may be wondering what player I'm talking about in terms of who can be that guy on the roster right now to be that Tyus Jones replacement. It's not Desmond Bane. I've talked a lot about Desmond Bane, being the backup point guard. Even as a starting shooting guard, he fills that backup point guard role really well. It's not Tyrell Terry, the guy they brought over from the Mavs, two-way, played some in the G League for a little bit, got a little bit of run here in Memphis, but it's not him. It's DeAnthony Melton. Now, a lot of you are saying, whoa, pump the brakes, DeMichael. Like, what are you talking about? We saw DeAnthony Melton at point guard. It wasn't good. I agree. I'm not arguing with you. Not arguing at all. What I'm saying is, first, we have to get this clear. If DeAnthony Melton becomes the new Grizzlies backup point guard, it will not look like Tyus Jones in the second unit. It will not be the same. Understand that. Also understand this. No matter who the Grizzlies get as their next backup point guard, it probably won't look the same as Tyus Jones, if it's not Tyus Jones, of course, because Tyus Jones, last 4 seasons, led the NBA assist to turnover ratio. You're just not going to go out and get another guy who's just going, new guy leads the league in assist to turnover ratio. It's going to look different. You're probably going to get a guy who can turns the ball over a little bit more. You're probably going to get a guy who's more aggressive as a scorer. It's going to look a little bit different regardless. But even if it looks different, the thing the Grizzlies want is that second bench to be as impactful. There is an avenue for DeAnthony Melton to be the backup point guard and for the unit to be as impactful. Let's talk about summer improvements. DeAnthony Melton, you talk about what has to happen for him to be that backup point guard. Ball handling, which is something, he's worked on, and he said he's going to work on more this summer. Off the dribble scoring, which is something he said unprovoked that he has to find better ways to get his shots off. We saw a lot of spot up 3-pointers the last couple seasons from him, or one dribble pull-ups, things like that. A lot of easy in the flow shots. Not a lot of off the dribble stuff for him. He mentioned in his exit interviews that off the dribble 3-point shooting, ball handling are 2 of his biggest emphasis going into this offseason. If those things improve for D'Anthony Melton. They don't have to be Kyrie Irving ball handling or Steph Curry, off the dribble from 3-point range. But if those things improve, there's your backup point guard right here. But it's not just that. It's not just that. What the Grizzlies will need to do if D'Anthony Melton is your backup point guard, you need to go get a shot creating shooting guard. The problem with the Grizzlies, and I said, the bench will look different next season, no matter what. As great as the Grizzlies bench was last year, they shot the ball well, outpaced opponents, top 10 scoring bench, one of the best net ratings among benches in the NBA. All of those things. As good as the bench was this past season, they didn't have a shot creator. Tyus Jones could get to his floater sometimes. D'Anthony Melton, we just mentioned his spot up shooting ability. Zaire Williams, Sean Conchar, we saw them have kind of limited roles this season in terms of spot up guys or doing things in transition and things like that. Brandon Clark has one of the best floaters in the NBA for a big man, but that's his move. It's not a lot other things there that we saw this past season. Kyle Anderson, you know, he can get to the rim, real crafty, but he's more of your guy who you expect to, attack a closeout or things like that. There wasn't a guy who you say, throw him the ball, there's 8 seconds on the shot clock, everyone move out of the way. What the Grizzlies will do is run pick and roll, try to hope for a hard screen that'll create some movement on the defense, or you can create an open opportunity for someone. That was the second unit, and they were really good at that. D'Anthony Melton, what he strives at is pushing the pace. And I'm going to get to the ideal shot creating shooting guard. I'm getting there. D'Anthony Melton strives at pushing the pace. That is solely why he would be your backup two guard. And I saw, a couple people mentioned to me about his turnovers. Yeah, we saw him turn the ball over. But guess what? Go look at the numbers. D'Anthony Melton, 2.7 assists to 1.5 turnovers. That's his assist to turnover ratio. You know whose assist to turnover ratio is right there, pretty much equally the same as his? Desmond Bane. I didn't hear many people complaining about Desmond Bane being the backup point guard this past season when Tyus Jones stepped up as a starter. No one was complaining about that. The reason was, and this is what Taylor Jenkins used to say, even though Desmond Bane was technically your backup point guard, the ball wasn't stuck in his hands with 8 seconds left when you're running pick and roll and you got him in such like a James Harden, Luka Doncic situation where he's having to dissect the defense and kick it out to guys. No. What happens was they would push the pace, get guys open, and take advantage of, mismatches in transition and things like that. D'Anthony Melton can strive at those same things. In the second half of the season, I watched him push the pace off of rebounds. One, he's a good rebounding guard. Two, he was one of the better players on the team at pushing the pace. So you factor in those things, the transition offense will be as good. The Grizzlies had the number one transition offense in the NBA. The transition offense will still be strong with D'Anthony Melton as your backup point guard. Two, here's the difference. If you make D'Anthony Melton your backup point guard, you need to go get a shot creating shooting guard to put in his place. Luckily for the Grizzlies, there are a lot of options out there. A lot of good options. Here are some names that I rattled off in a story that I wrote on commercialappeal.com. So go check out that story as well on commercialappeal.com that I wrote about D'Anthony Melton and his future at the point guard position. But the main name is Victor Oladipo. Victor Oladipo is in Miami right now. Everyone, you get to watch him close. Keep watching him close because this is a potential guy that could be on the Grizzlies' radar. And the thing about his situation is he's in a really good, healthy situation right now, but that team has a lot of money tied to Duncan Robinson, Tyler Hero, Kyle Lowry, and then, they just got Max Strus on a bargain deal. So they don't have much incentive to why to pay another guard. There's not much incentive there. Victor Oladipo will be coveted because he's shown, I mean, defensively in this series against the Celtics, he's been locked in. The offense has been come and go, but you see the flashes of the guy who was an all NBA player, in with the Pacers. Victor Oladipo would be perfect. One, the defensive tenacity that we just mentioned. I mean, he had 4 steals a couple games ago against the Celtics. He was all over those guys. That fits perfectly into Memphis's culture. But we talked about having that shot creator. When the shot clock is going down, there's 8 seconds left, and it's like, who's going to score? Throw it to Victor Oladipo. Let him run pick and roll. He has proven in his career that he can succeed in those situations. How about a Memphis native? Because Victor Oladipo is your main guy, but how about a Memphis native? Lou Williams. Now, Lou Williams may retire after this season. And, even when he left the Clippers, he was telling people at that time that he's going to hang it up. It was so happened that he went to Atlanta, went to a great situation, made the Eastern Conference Finals, came back this season. But Lou Williams is born in Memphis. I think he left in Memphis when he was 9 years old. So he left and went to Atlanta. So Atlanta is also home for him. But Lou Williams, you talk about shot creating 6 men. Defensively, there isn't much there. But offensively, what he can do in the pick and roll would be huge in terms of helping out a guy like D'Anthony Melton, in terms of you talk about ball handling duties and making, the second unit run smoother. Couple other names. Not going to linger on too long with these guys. Malik Monk had a great season, with the Lakers, with all the mess that was going on. He was the bright spot. Had a great year, but the Lakers do not have his bird rights, which means they can't offer anything more than other teams can. And if they're in a financial hard situation, they can't pay a lot of money to retain him if there's no salary cap room there. So Malik Monk is a true free agent. Whoever wants him can go get him. The Grizzlies should be in a good situation where they're able to offer a guy like that. He showed, he's a good shot creator this year, off the dribble, three-point range, and he's also an Arkansas native. So again, a guy from right across the West Memphis Bridge. He's right across the bridge. So this guy, I mean, he's a bucket getter. He's a guy who you defensively, again, kind of like Lou Williams, not great, but once you have D'Anthony Melton, potentially, Zion Williams, or a guy like Dylan Brooks, John Conchar, Brandon Clark, you have some good defenders who will be around him. Couple other names. Lance Stevenson, real resurgent season this year in Indiana when he came back there. Shot over 45% from the field. Really showed, his ability to pass the ball as a big playmaker. I think he'd be a good fit as well. Jeremy Lamb is another one. Career, is kind of not going as well as it did a couple years ago, but still another guy who's a shot creator, can get his own shot, and would fit seamlessly into this second unit. All of those guys are good options if D'Anthony Melton is your point guard. Now, if D'Anthony Melton is your point guard, I think you need that. You don't throw him out there and you go out there and put, with all due respect to John Conchar. John Conchar is your shooting guard, Zion Williams as your small forward, and expect that to work, because now you're not going to have much shot creation. But D'Anthony Melton is good at the things that the Grizzlies like to do. They like to push the pace. They like for the guards to rebound. They like to create havoc on defense. He can do all of those things from the point guard position, and they can go out and get a shot creating shooting guard kind of to get in his place and kind of make that offense on the second unit look a little bit smoother. So it would look different. It would not look like the typical second units that we saw during the Tyus Jones tenure, but it should be as impactful. But we appreciate you for listening to the Locked On Grizzlies podcast. Before you go, make sure you tune into the Locked On NBA podcast as well. That's where some of the Locked On experts are talking about what's going on in the NBA right now. They're focusing on the playoffs. Only 4 teams left: Eastern Conference Finals, Western Conference Finals, but they're also touching base on what's going on around the league. We just mentioned it. It's draft time, and a lot of players, a lot of teams, free agency, All of that stuff will be covered on the Locked On NBA podcast. But we appreciate you for listening to Locked On Grizzlies. Make sure you stay tuned. Stay tuned with everything that we have going on. Tomorrow, it's time for some draft talk. We did our first draft talk Thursday last week. We'll do it again this Thursday. Make sure you tuned in for that. Again, I'm DeMichael Cole, and we appreciate you for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies.